It doesn't matter how many different biases and how many different illogical phenomena that we understand and how many concepts of logic that we've really committed to memory. If we can't put them into use, they're worthless. So today's video is going to be focusing on how can we use these in real conversation and in everyday life. The first section of this video is going to focus on reading sources. The second half is going to be more face-to-face interaction. So let's start off with news. Is it fake or is it real? The first step is going to be engage in the content that we're reading, whether we might be listening to it. Doesn't matter. We have to engage in it and be aware. I mentioned this before. Turn on your system 2, which is the more logical, more rational side of your brain. For me, this looks like maybe taking notes on something, highlighting certain things if I'm reading them, or simply just putting some headphones on with just some beats in the background so I can really just focus in on exactly what I'm doing. Second thing is going to be identify the focus and the purpose of the article. Is it an opinion? Is it satirical? Or is it factual? This is extremely important because this frames the entire rest of the article. Step 3, read the entire thing. Articles sometimes are long, sometimes they're pretty short. But once you start reading something, you got to finish the whole thing out. It doesn't matter if you're hearing certain information from the top. It might be completely overturned by the end of the article, and you can't just take a soundbite out of that. You got to read the whole thing. Once you've read that first article that you've seen, maybe just out of Google search, there's really the next thing after you followed those first 3 steps is to go read another perspective. Find the opposite perspective. A lot of people know, like the news sources, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, they all hold different view on these topics. So go and read each perspective. The last thing you can really do in this situation while you're reading something, reading up on fake news or real news, is to look for a common source. Oftentimes all these news articles are referring to a common source, and then they all kind of put their own spin on it or emphasize things that they want. So if you can find that common source, which is oftentimes at the bottom of the page, then you can really look and gauge the information for yourself. Next, we're going to look at religious topics. Step 1 is the same, engage with the content, whether it's taking notes, put some headphones in, really focusing on what you're doing. Step number 2 is going to be beware of bias. Ask yourself, who are you listening to? Are you listening to a Catholic preacher telling you how good Catholicism is? Clearly, he's going to have a certain personal bias, and is that inherently bad? No. Can you listen to him still? Absolutely. But you have to know where he's coming from before you should be completely receptive of the information that he's giving you. Step 3 is don't take it out of context. In other words, figure out the context. Figure out exactly what he's saying in the context, in the world that he is saying it. And I'll use the example of Catholicism again. If he says something and you're like, what does that mean? Trying to figure out what it means from a Catholic perspective. When it comes to a lot of religious texts and a lot of religious information, there's going to be alternate interpretations of everything that you're looking at. It's very important that you go and look for those other interpretations. Sometimes there's hundreds of them. You just need a few differing perspectives so you kind of get the idea of like where in the ballpark this could fall. Because step 5, and this is by far the most important, be humble. Don't hold on and latch onto a belief so much that it becomes part of your own identity and you won't let go of it. Beliefs should change, they should mold. It's really an indication of somebody who's a healthy skeptic, a healthy intellectual. Last is scientific. Going through biology classes and chemistry classes in college, there's a lot of scientific material that we read, and oftentimes we're instructed on how exactly to read this stuff. So again, step 1, engage. Step 2, check what you're reading. Is this a blog post? Is this an article about a scientific journal? Is this somebody's opinion about scientific information? Figure out exactly what the article means or what the article is about before you dive into it. Step 3 is going to read the abstract, read the conclusion, and then read the body. You go into the abstract, you get kind of an idea of what the entire body is about. It's kind of a summary of that and a summary of the entire thing. You go and then read the conclusion, right? This isn't like a story, so you can go and read the end before you dive in to the middle. You're not going to spoil anything for yourself. So go read the conclusion so you have a good idea of what the results were. And oftentimes the conclusions are pretty small anyways. And a lot of times the body of these articles can be very massive and very, very scientifically rigorous. So then you should go look at the body and try to figure out all the information that you can glean from that. Take your notes, highlight things. But the body in this case ends up being not extremely crucial. Step 4 is go and look for more information. Oftentimes there'll be other authors and other articles that are linked at the bottom of these pages or referenced throughout. You can go and click on those or Google those and figure out what an alternate perspective on some similar study is. Next, we're going to be moving on to face-to-face interactions. The first step is the same, broken record here. Engage with the content, be aware, turn on system 2. What this might look like in a conversation is, going to a place that's more quiet, that you can really talk to somebody. Don't do it. Don't have a super deep, super academic conversation with somebody in an extremely loud area where you can't understand them very well. Also, make sure that they have your undivided attention. Don't be checking your phone, looking at things as they're trying to talk to you. Step 2 is understanding the individual's motives. Are you talking to a Mormon priest that wants to see you on church this Sunday? Although this isn't a bad thing that he wants you to come to church, it's going to change how he talks to you. It's going to change his message. He's going to change his tone. He's going to change how he frames the conversation. Step 3 is educate from all angles. It's okay to admit that you don't know the answer to something. It's also okay to say to whoever you're talking to, what's the opposing view on that? If somebody were arguing with you, what would be his strongest point? Those are good questions to ask, and they're rare questions that people don't get asked very often. And oftentimes I see it as a red flag if somebody can't answer that question, then clearly they haven't looked at alternate perspectives. Step 4 is be patient. Don't feel like you need to be in a rush to make a decision. I'll use the Mormon priest example again. If he comes to you and he really wants you to come to church on Sunday, he's talking to you with a very, very chill, very invitational tone. Don't feel that you have to make your decision by next Sunday. Maybe, you're struggling with something in the Mormon religion or whatever. You haven't completely made up your mind about that certain topic. That's 100% fine. Don't feel pressured to go and make a decision as fast as you can just because somebody wants to see you next week or somebody would like for you to make that decision sooner. You're on your own time. You're on your own time scale. Focus on yourself. Another thing that goes along with that is that your brain can work on things in the background. Your brain, I think it's like 7 different things that it can focus on other than what you're primarily focusing on. So if you take some information in, if you're trying to immediately make a decision, it's not always the best option. If you can wait, if you can, be patient and let that information kind of marinate in your brain, oftentimes you're going to make a more rational, well-informed decision. Step number 5, and this one's also kind of familiar, is be humble. Don't hold a belief too tight. Know that your beliefs are going to change. That's 100% fine. If you can commit these tips to memory, whether it's reading sources or going into face-to-face interactions, you're going to be able to look at information and receive information and determine whether or not it's reliable and determine what weight that decision or that information should hold, which is going to help you make more well-informed decisions. For more information on developing rational skills, make sure to subscribe here at Atlas.